Hello and welcome to the Intentional Brief, your weekly video update on the one big thing in cybersecurity news for middle market companies, their investors, and management teams. I'm your host, Shay Colson, managing partner at Intentional Cybersecurity, and you can find us online at intentionalcyber.com. Today is Monday, April 27th, 2026. The war in Iran continues with the Strait of Hormuz still being closed, and President Trump faced yet another assassination attempt at an event over the weekend in D.C. Meanwhile, the Mythos train keeps rolling, and we've now got some real-world data points to consider. We learned last week that Firefox parent company Mozilla, has had early access to the Mythos model for some security research and vulnerability identification. And they write in a blog post entitled, quote, "The 0 days are numbered," that Mythos has been very helpful in terms of finding vulnerabilities. Specifically, they note that they haven't seen any bugs that couldn't have been found by an elite human researcher with the Mythos model, which I think is worth unpacking a little bit here. On the one hand, I think they're trying to say that while this AI tool is good, it doesn't do anything fundamentally that humans can't do, which, as longtime viewers of this program will note, remains generally my take on AI, that it's a time compression and a skill compression tool. But that said, how many software companies have access to a cadre of elite human researchers? I would posit not very many, certainly not as many as would have access to Mythos were it made available. It also reinforces the core function of AI to this point, which drastically reduces both the amount of time and the amount of skill it takes to produce a certain output. Can humans do this research? Sure. Can all humans? Not today, at least not very many. And so the cost continues to fall, just as the opportunity cost continues to fall in terms of building any piece of software, which has basically dropped essentially to zero in this era of vibe coding. Mozilla, in fact, specifically calls this out, noting that, quote, "The gap between machine discoverable and human discoverable bugs favors the attacker, who can concentrate many months of costly human effort to find a single bug. Closing this gap erodes the attacker's long-term advantage by making all discoveries cheap," end quote. What they don't address in this quote, though, is that attackers now also gain this same advantage, essentially creating a race condition out of every vulnerability: who can find and exploit versus who can find and fix. Mozilla did not release specifics about how many of the 271 fixes presented in the latest release of Firefox were discovered by Mythos. They were happy to allow the reader to draw their own conclusion, and also were hoping that the reader is not thinking about how one of the most widely reviewed, widely distributed piece of software in our modern enterprise has this many bugs in it at this stage after literally millions of scans and reviews. We would also note that Patch Tuesday from Microsoft this week, who also is part of Anthropic's Glasswing project for early access to Mythos, was the second largest ever in terms of fixes for Windows. Another package that gets a ton of both automated and human scans on it. So the net of this for me is that Mythos, and really any of the powerful models being created by these frontier labs, are worth considering. We saw another piece of news from Anthropic in a bit of a PR battle, as it was noted last week that a group of unauthorized users in a Discord channel have been using Mythos regularly in an unapproved, unauthorized way, not even for security research. But the takeaway from this is that these models will find their way into the wild, and that the capabilities they make available will very quickly trickle down to both commodity attackers and commodity defenders, and also commodity chat rooms, apparently. We need to plan accordingly by building the processes, tools, automations, and political buy-in at our organizations to be able to patch anything, anytime, anywhere, as fast as you can. That is simply the reality that we are going to be living in for the foreseeable future. From a fundraising perspective, we had another banner week last week with more than $37 billion in newly committed capital, including EQT raising $15.6 billion for the largest Asian private equity buyout fund ever seen. Partners Group closing their 8th private equity secondaries program with $9 billion. Waterland Private Equity Investments putting up 3.5 billion euros for their 9th fund and a $500 million partnership fund alongside that. Adam Street putting up $2.5 billion for their 6th co-investment fund, and HarborVest Partners closing Fund 13 with about $2.4 billion. We blew past the $100 billion mark for the month and are now sitting at almost $125 billion with a whole week to go. Million. Wonders never cease. Billion, 125 billion. The numbers are getting so big that they're hard to even make sense of. A reminder that you can find links to all the articles we talked about in the comment section below. You can find back issues and written transcripts of these videos at intentionalcyber.com, and we will see you next week for another edition of the Intentional Brief.